Chapter 10. A maid showed me to a corridor lined with doors. Each one was painted a different pastel color and had a card affixed to it announcing the name of the room. We passed the lime room, the daisy room, and the opal room, and stopped before the lavender room. The maid opened the door. For a moment I forgot my hunger. I was in a cloud of light purple. Some of the purples blushed faintly pink, others were tinted pale blue. But there was no other color. The curtains were streamers, undulating from the breeze made by the door closing behind me. Beneath my feet was a hooked rug in the design of a huge violet. In a corner stood a clay chamber pot, disguised as a decorative cabbage. The 5 beds were swathed in a gauzy fabric. The 5 bureaus were painted with wavy stripes of pale and paler lavender. I wanted to throw myself on a bed and cry about being so hungry and about everything else. But these were not beds onto which one could throw oneself. A purple chair was placed next to one of the 2 windows. I sank into it. If I didn't succumb to starvation, I would be here for a long time, with hateful mistresses and with Hattie ordering me about. I stared out the window at Madame Edith's garden until exhaustion and hunger produced a kind of stupor in me. In a while, I slept. "Here, Ella, you can eat this." An urgent whisper pushed its way into my dream about roasted pheasant stuffed with chestnuts. Someone shook my shoulder. "Wake up, Ella, wake up." An order. I was awake. Arita thrust a roll into my hands. "It's all I could get. Eat it before the others come in." In 2 swallows, I ate the soft white roll, more air than sustenance, but more sustenance than I'd had in days. "Thank you." "Do you sleep here too?" She nodded. "Where?" The door opened and 3 maidens entered. "Look, queer ducks flock together." The speaker was the tallest pupil in the school. She pronounced her L's as Y's, mocking Arita's accent. "Yuk, queer ducks flock together." "Esectic ivestibi arusa darenzi avetime ojanto," I asked Arita. "Is this how they behave at finishing school?" "Otamso ephibissa asura apiri." Sometimes they are much worse. "Are you from Aorthia too?" the tall maiden asked me. "No, but Arita's teaching me the beautiful Aorthian language. In Aorthian, you are in Iba Unja." It only meant tall girl. I didn't know any insults in Aorthian. However, Arita was laughing, which made it seem the worst of epithets. I laughed too. Arita collapsed on top of me, and together we shook the purple chair. Madame Edith, the head mistress, bustled in. "Young ladies, what do I see?" Arita leapt up, but I remained seated. I couldn't stop laughing. "My chairs are not made to take such abuse, and young ladies do not sit 2 in a seat. Do you hear me? Ella, stop your unseemly laughter." I stopped mid-giggle. "That's better. Since it's your first day here, I shall excuse your behavior and trust that it will improve tomorrow." Madame Edith turned to the others. "Into your night dresses, young ladies. The shores of sleep are approaching." Arita and I exchanged glances. It was very cheering to have a friend. Everyone else reached the shores of sleep, but I remained oceans away. I had been given a nightdress to cover my bowels, so covered with bows and frills that I couldn't lie flat comfortably. I slipped out of bed and opened my carpet bag. If I couldn't sleep, I could read. Madame Edith thought fear of the dark was to be expected in young ladies, so a lamp was left burning. My book opened to a letter from Mandy. Dear Ella, this morning I baked scones. Bertha and Nathan and I will eat them for a snack before we go to bed. But I baked 2 extra. We'll have to divide yours and eat them too. I promised myself I wouldn't trouble you by saying how much I miss you, and see how I start. That parrot man, named Simon, came here today with one of his birds to give you. It speaks Gnomic and Elfian. He said it wasn't fine enough for the menagerie, but you might like it. He told me what to feed it. I never thought I'd be cook to a parrot. I wish it would stop talking once in a while. I wonder if I have a recipe for parrot stew. Don't worry, sweet, I would never cook your present. Yesterday you had a grander visitor, and received a bigger gift than a bird. The prince himself came to see you, leading a centaur colt. When I told him you were away from home, he wanted to know where you'd gone and when you'd be back. And when he heard you were at finishing school, he was indignant. He demanded to know why you needed to be finished, since there was nothing wrong with you to start with. I couldn't answer him because I'd like to ask that father of yours the same question. I did tell him we had nowhere to keep a growing centaur. He's a little beauty, but what could I do with him? Your prince said he'd raise him for you. He asked me to tell you the colt's name, Apple. That made me remember my manners, and I gave him his name to eat before he left with the prince. Speaking of leaving, your father departed the same day you did. Said he was off to the Greeneries. The Greenies, which I gathered was his disrespectful name for the elves. Said not to expect him back any time soon. I wish you were coming home soon. Bertha and Nathan send their love, and I send mine by the bushel, by the barrel, by the ton. From your old cook, Mandy. P.S. Drink your tonic. I closed the book and whispered to its spine, Don't erase the letter, please. Then I drank my tonic. I sent our colt, a little beauty. If only I could see him and pet him and let him know me. The tears that hadn't come in the afternoon came now. Mandy would be desperate if she knew. If she knew I hadn't eaten in 3 days, and if she knew I was under the thumb of a monster like Hattie. The next morning, music mistress led us in song and singled out my off-keyed voice. Ella does not notice that there is more than one note, she told everyone. Come here, child, sing this. She played a note on the harpsichord. I wouldn't be able to. I could never carry a tune. What would happen when I couldn't obey? I sang the wrong note. Music mistress frowned. Higher, or we'll send you to a different school to sing with the young gentlemen. She depressed the key again. My next attempt was much too high. One last covered her ears. I wished her an earache. Music mistress played again. My temples throbbed. I sang. A little lower. I hit the note. She played another. I sang it. She played a scale. I sang every note. I beamed. I'd always wished I could sing. I sang the scale again, louder. Perfect. That's enough, young lady. You must sing when I tell you to, and not otherwise. An hour later, dancing mistress told me to step lightly. My partner was Julia, the tall maiden who had teased Arita the night before. I pressed on her arms, using her to support my weight so I could step lightly. Stop that. She pulled away. I fell. I heard giggles. Dancing mistress took Julia's place. I couldn't lean on her. I pretended my feet were balloons. I pretended the floor would crack if I didn't move lightly. We stepped. We glided. We sprang forward, jumped back. I wasn't graceful, but I didn't shake the ground. My gown was soaked with perspiration. That's better. At lunch, manners mistress said, Don't rap your knuckles on the table, Ella. The king would be ashamed of you. She frequently invoked King Gerald. Tables were forever safe for me. Take small stitches, Eleanor, and don't yank the thread. It's not a rein, and you're not a coachman, sewing mistress said later in the afternoon. I stabbed myself with the needle, but my stitches shrank. It was the same every day. I dreaded new orders. The curse didn't make me change easily. I had to concentrate every second. In my mind, I repeated my commands in an endless refrain. When I awoke, I instructed myself not to bounce out of bed. Leave the night dress for the servants to put away. At breakfast, don't blow on my porridge and don't spit on the lumps. Spit out the lumps. On an afternoon walk, don't skip. Don't leap about. Once I actually spoke aloud. It was at dinner. Don't slurp, I instructed myself. I said it softly, but a pupil seated near me heard, and she told the others. The only subjects that came easily were those taught by writing mistress, composition, and ciphering. She also taught penmanship, which was the one subject in which I did not attain excellence, because writing mistress issued no orders. She taught Aorthian, but no other languages. When I told her I knew a little of the exotic tongues and wished to learn more, she gave me a dictionary of exotic speech. It became my second favorite subject after Mandy's present. It became my second favorite book after Mandy's present. Whenever I had time, I practiced the languages, especially Ogreese. The meanings were dreadful, but there was an attraction in speaking the words. They were smooth, sleek, and slithery, the way a talking snake would sound. There were words like pasvav, super delicious, and siong, eat, and barning, dinner, and fuft, taste, and fau, sour. My progress in all my subjects astounded the mistresses. In my first month, I did little right. In my second, I did little wrong. And gradually, it all became natural. Light steps, small stitches, quiet voice, ramrod straight back, deep curtsies without creaking knees, no yawns, soup tilted away from me, and no slurping. But in bed, before I fell asleep, I'd imagined what I would do if I were free of Lucinda's curse. At dinner, I'd paint lines of gravy on my face and hurl meat pasties at Madam Mistress. I'd pile headmistress's best china on my head and walk with a wobble and a swagger till every piece was smashed. And then I'd collect the smashed pottery and the smashed meat pasties and grind them into my perfect stitchery. And that is chapter 10. I find it very interesting being able to watch her grow up. I really, really like that. Like watching her overcome the curse, but doing it in natural ways. But it's not easy and she often can't overcome it. Like being able to see her at school where she she is actually doing all of these things correctly and she's learning. But because of the curse, she learns way faster than other people because she has to. And she still doesn't like it. Like, she has her agency taken away. And I like that even though she's good at it now in only a month, she's like, I still wouldn't do it, All right, this is the last chapter I'm going to read for at least right now because after this, I have to go make mashed potatoes. Chapter 11. Except for Arita, I had little pleasure from the society at finishing school. Only Hattie's set pretended to be friendly, and they treated me with the same oily condescension Hattie visited on me in public. They were an odious group, Hattie and the two she called her special friends, Blossom and Delicia. Blossom was the niece and sole heir to an unmarried earl. Her conversation was mostly worries that the earl would marry and have a child who would replace her as his heir. Delicia, the daughter of a duke, spoke rarely. When she did, it was to complain. The room was too draughty. The meal was ill-prepared. The housemaid had acted above her station. One of the other pupils wore rouge. The mistresses came to dislike me too. At first, while I struggled to satisfy them and began to succeed, they made a pet of me, which I hated. But when finished behavior became my second nature, they learned I was nobody's pet. I spoke as infrequently as I could and met their eyes only when I had to, and I returned to my old game. Sing more softly, Ella. They can hear you in Aorthia. Sing more softly, Ella. They can hear you in Aorthia. I became inaudible. Not so soft. The rest of us would like to hear your sweet tones. I sang too loud again, although not so much as before. Music mistress had to spend a quarter hour inching me along to the desired volume. Lift your feet, young ladies. This is a spirited gavourot. My legs shot up above my waist, and so on. It was a tiresome game, but I had to play it or I feel like a complete puppet. Hattie didn't tell anyone about my obedience. When she had an order for me, she'd tell me to meet her in the garden after supper when no one else was near. On the first such occasion, she instructed me to pick a bouquet for her. Luckily, she didn't know I was goddaughter to a fairy cook. I picked the most fragrant blooms, then ran to the herb garden, hoping to find something useful. Elferwort was my preference. If I found it, Hattie would have an itchy rash on her face for a week. Most of the herbs were the ordinary sort, but as I turned to leave, I spotted a sprig of bogweed. Taking care not to breathe in its scent, I plucked it and placed it next to a rose. Hattie was delighted with the flowers and buried her face in them. They're sublime, but what the? As the scent of the bogweed worked on her, her smile faded and her expression became vacant. What would make you stop giving me orders? She answered in a flat voice, if you stopped obeying them. Of course, I had wasted a question, and I had no idea how long the bogweed scent would last. But as long as it lasted, I could ask her anything, and she would answer honestly. What else would stop you? I asked quickly. Nothing, she thought. My death. No likely release from that quarter. What orders do you plan to give me? I don't plan. Why do you hate me? You never admire me. Do you admire me? Yes. Why? You're pretty and brave. She envied me. I was amazed. What do you fear? I asked. Ogres, bandits, drowning, becoming ill, climbing mountains, mice, dogs, cats, birds, horses, spiders, worms, tunnels, I stopped her. She was afraid of everything. What do you want most? What do you want most in the world? To be queen. A rabbit queen. Only I would obey her. Her face was changing, resuming its usual expression of gleeful malice. I tried one more question. What are your secrets? She didn't answer, just tugged cruelly on a handful of my hair. Her eyes lost their dull cast. Why am I standing here? She looked down at her flowers, but didn't sniff them again. Oh, yes, what a good lady-in-waiting to bring me such a beautiful bouquet, she frowned. But one scent is not sweet. Take it out. I removed the bogweed and ground it into my foot. If I had thought of it, I could have asked her how she could be defeated. Hattie's orders were chiefly chores. I think she lacked the imagination to devise more interesting commands. I brushed her clothes, cleaned her boots, rubbed her neck when it ached. Several times I had to sneak into the pantry and steal cookies. On one occasion, I had to clip her toenails. Do you rub brine into your feet? I asked, trying not to choke. I took revenge whenever I could. Spiders and mice from Madame Edith's cellar found their way into Hattie's bed. I'd stay awake at night and wait for the satisfying shriek. And so it went. Hattie issued commands, and I retaliated. But there was no balance. Hattie was always ahead. She had the power. She held the whip. Arita was my only comfort. We ate our meals side by side. We sewed together. In our dancing lessons, we were partners. I told her about Frel and Mandy and Char. She told me about her parents who kept an inn. They weren't wealthy, another reason she was unpopular. When she left school, she would use her accomplishments to help them. She was kinder than anyone I had ever known. When Julia, the tall wench, had ate too many grapes from Madame Edith's arbor and was sick all night, Arita nursed her, although Julia's friends slept soundly. I helped, but only for Arita's sake. My nature was not so forgiving. In the garden one evening, I found myself telling Arita about Mother. Before she died, we used to climb trees like this one. I rested a hand on the trunk of a low-branching oak. We'd go way up and sit as quiet as we could. Then we'd toss twigs or acorns at anyone who passed beneath. What happened to her? She asked. Don't tell me if you don't want to. I didn't mind. When I finished telling her, she sang an Aorthian morning song. Hard farewell with no greeting to come. Sad farewell when love is torn away. Long farewell till death dies. But the lost one is with you. Her tenderness strengthens you. Her gaiety uplifts you. Her honor purifies you. More than memory, the lost one is found. I don't know. That wasn't really a tune. I just was singing whatever came to my mind. Arita's voice was as smooth as syrup and as rich as gnome's gold. I cried, steady tears like rain. And, like rain, they brought ease. You have a beautiful voice, I said, when I could speak. We Aorthians are all singers, but singing mistress says my voice is too husky. Hers is as thin as a string, and yours is perfect. A bell rang in the house, calling us in to prepare for bed. Is my nose red from crying? I asked. A little. I don't want the others to see. I'll stay out a while longer. Manners mistress will be angry. I shrugged. She'll only tell me I've disgraced the king. I'll stay with you. I can watch your nose and tell you when it's not red anymore. Pay attention. Don't let your eyes wander. I wrinkled the feature. Arita giggled. I won't. Manners mistress will ask what we're doing out here. I was laughing too. I'll tell her we're watching your nose. And I'll tell her I'm wrinkling it. She'll want to know what the king would think of our behavior. I'll tell her the queen watches every night. While he wrinkles his nose 7 times. The bell rang again. Your nose isn't red now, Arita said. We ran for the house and met Manners mistress at the door on her way to search for us. The sight of her set us off again. Young ladies, go to your room. What would the king say? In the hall, still giggling, we met Hattie. Having a nice time? We were, I answered. I won't keep you then, but tomorrow, Ella, you must spend some time in the garden with me. You shouldn't associate with the lower orders, like that wench from Aorthia, she said the next evening. Arita is a higher order than you are, and I choose my own friends. My dear, I hate to cause you grief, but you must end your friendship with her. My commentary for this chapter, I don't really have much. I would say just kind of it's interesting. Like, I like the finer parts of it that you don't really get to see in the movie. And in the movie, there's, like, some plots and some plot lines that they put in that, like, literally just don't exist in the book. So I think that's pretty interesting.